Have you ever looked at how the world works and just thought, wait a minute, that makes absolutely no sense? Well, turns out you're not wrong. But underneath all that chaos, there's often this hidden logic, a set of bizarre, totally counterintuitive rules that are secretly running the whole show. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain.
All right, let's kick things off with a couple of head-scratchers. First up, why would America, one of the wealthiest countries on Earth, treat millions of these massive, super sturdy steel boxes like they're just disposable trash? It seems like an incredible waste, right?
And how about this one? The single biggest oil producer on the planet is also one of its biggest customers. How is that even possible? I mean, really? Well, the answers to these questions aren't just fun facts. They actually reveal these strange and powerful forces that secretly shape our entire global economy.
So let's start with the mystery of those millions of discarded steel boxes. This isn't just a story about being wasteful. Nope. It's a story about a massive, hidden imbalance baked right into the architecture of global trade.
Okay, first things first. You got to understand the sheer scale we're talking about here. A staggering 90%. That's right, 90% of everything you buy, your phone, your clothes, your coffee maker, has spent time on a boat inside one of these containers. It's basically the world's circulatory system.
So where are all these containers going? Well, this chart tells the whole story. You've got this colossal trade imbalance. China, with a trade surplus of over $823 billion, is sending out a literal tidal wave of goods and the containers they travel in. On the flip side, you have the US, the world's biggest consumer, just importing way more than it exports. And that imbalance creates a logistical nightmare. Containers just flood into US ports, packed with stuff. But there just aren't enough American exports to fill them all up for the trip back. Get this, a full 60% of them end up sitting empty. Now you might think, okay, so just ship them back empty, right? But that's where the hidden logic kicks in.
And here's where the math gets really weird. To send just one of those empty containers on that long journey back across the Pacific costs about $3,000. It's taking up valuable real estate on a ship that could be carrying a full, paying container.
And here's the kicker, the final piece of the puzzle. It only costs a manufacturer in China $2,000 to build a brand new container right from scratch. So let me ask you, why would anyone pay $3,000 to get a used one back when they can make a shiny new one for $1,000 less? The answer is, they don't.
So millions of these perfectly good containers are just stranded in America. They get a whole second life. They're sold off for cheap storage. You see them on construction sites. People even turn them into these cool, trendy homes and offices. And the rest, they get melted down for their 2 tons of steel. They're not trash. They're this crazy side effect of a global economy that's so hyper-efficient, it's literally cheaper to build from scratch than to return something the size of a truck.
So we've seen how simple cost-benefit math can make millions of steel boxes totally disposable. But what happens when the hidden logic isn't about shipping costs, but about chemistry, geography, and a law that's over 100 years old? That brings us to our second and even crazier paradox.
This quote from one of the sources just nails the absurdity of the situation. The US is the world's #1 oil producer. I'm talking ahead of Saudi Arabia, ahead of Russia, yet it's also one of the world's biggest oil importers. It just defies common sense. But it turns out there are 3 secret reasons that make this bizarre reality possible.
Okay, so this whole riddle breaks down into 3 main parts. First, we've got a chemistry problem. Second, a logistics problem. And third, a legal problem. All thanks to a law that's been on the books for a century. Let's tackle them one by one.
So, here's the most crucial point. Not all oil is the same. The US fracking boom produces tons of what's called light, sweet crude. It's thin, low viscosity. Think skim milk. But here's the problem. Most of America's giant refineries were built decades ago, and they were specifically designed to process heavy, sour crude, a thicker, sludgier oil they were importing from places like Mexico and Venezuela. And trying to retool those refineries now, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. So you can't refine the oil right where you pump it, you gotta ship it. And that is where this law from 1920 throws a giant wrench in the works. The Jones Act was passed after World War I to make sure America always had a strong shipping industry for national security. It says that any ship moving stuff between 2 American ports must be American-built, American-owned, and American-crewed. And here is the absolutely staggering consequence of that 100-year-old law. Because American ships are so much more expensive to build and operate, domestic shipping costs go through the roof. So for a refinery in, say, New York, it is literally cheaper to buy oil from West Africa and ship it 4,000 miles across the Atlantic than it is to buy American oil from Texas and ship it around Florida. It's a complete paradox created by a collision of chemistry and history.
So these old domestic laws can create some seriously bizarre outcomes.
But sometimes the hidden logic isn't about a country's own laws, but about finding loopholes in the fabric of international agreements. And that brings us to our final story, a geopolitical heist happening in plain sight that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie.
So how on earth did Iran, a country under crushing international sanctions, manage to get its hands on a fleet of massive Boeing 777 passenger jets? Well, it was an elaborate cloak and dagger operation. First, they found some used planes sitting in an aircraft boneyard in Australia. A U.S. shell company bought them, then passed them through a fake company in Madagascar. Then they hid the planes in Cambodia, filed a bogus flight plan to Kenya, and then, mid-flight, they just turned off their transponders and vanished into Iranian airspace. Unbelievable.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, they've got the planes, but can't the rest of the world just ground them? And the answer, shockingly, is no. And that's because of a really powerful piece of international law called the Chicago Convention. It was set up after World War II to keep global air travel moving smoothly, and it basically says you can't block another country's civilian aircraft unless you're officially at war.
This creates a perfect geopolitical checkmate. Iran's airline now flies these smuggled jets on international routes. And if a European country, for example, were to ban them from landing, well, Iran could just turn around and close its own airspace, which happens to be a supercritical flight path for almost every airline flying from Europe to Asia. That would force long, expensive detours, and that's a price no airline wants to pay.
So, when you look at all of this, a disposable shipping container, an oil superpower that has to import oil, a ghost fleet of jets flying in plain sight, the pattern is exactly the same. What seems completely illogical is actually driven by this powerful, hidden logic. It's a complex web of pure cost, historical accidents, and clever geopolitical loopholes that dictates how our world really works.
And that really leaves you with one final thought, doesn't it? If these are the systems we've just uncovered, what other strange, invisible rules are quietly shaping our economy, our politics, and maybe even our own lives without us ever knowing they're there?